IVM.
Hi, I'm Satyajit.
Hi, I'm Rachita.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project.
We have as our guest today Dhruv Nath. In the first half, we discuss his book Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares, co-written with Sushanto Mitra.
In the second half, we discuss Why I Stopped Wearing My Socks by Alok Kejriwal, Coffee Can Investing by Saurabh Mukherjee, and Freedom at Midnight by Dominic, Lapierre and Larry Collins. Happy listening!
So now for a very, very important issue. You can get lots of material about startups that succeeded, right? Those who raised angel funding or even multiple rounds of funding. But what about those that failed to do so? Shouldn't you be learning from them as well? To take an analogy from the film industry, if you want to be an actor, it is good to learn from Shah Rukh Khan, but isn't it even more important to learn from those who came from their villages to try their luck in Bollywood, failed, and went back to their fields, right? So that, ladies and gentlemen, is where this book gets really exciting, because we decided as authors in our wisdom to write about both these success stories as well as the failures that we have seen, right? Failures that have not been written about and where the learning is not available to other budding startups, because, there is an old saying, you probably learn a lot more from failures than you do from successes.
Thank you, Dhruv Nath. That was an excerpt from his book, Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. We'll be right back after this.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the नानकारी पॉडकास्ट every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM पॉडकास्ट ऐप या वेबसाइट पर, या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
Welcome to Paperback by the Open Library Project. I am your co-host Satyajit, storyteller and entrepreneur. I'm hosting this podcast with my co-founder at the Open Library Project, Rachita Sharma.
Hi guys, my name is Rachita. I'm an ex-banker, social impact entrepreneur, podcaster, writer, and publisher. You can check out my deliberations on Instagram at neural_pathways and my articles for Thrive Global India. The Open Library Project is a curated library service which we offer to corporates on a subscription basis. The idea here is to create value, build a knowledge community, and encourage a growth mindset amongst our members.
Today we have with us on the show Dhruv Nath. Dhruv is the author of Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. Welcome to the show, Dhruv.
Thanks so much.
Lovely to have you on the show.
It was a very interesting excerpt that we started the show out with. But before we get into the book itself, let's talk about your journey as an author, starting point for you.
Okay, actually, I have written 4 books, but I'll tell you about this one. And in fact, I've been writing for, I think, 30 years now, articles, columns in various magazines. But if you look at this book, see, I have been an angel investor for about 7 to 8 years now. Okay. And my co-author, Sushanto Mitra, he has been in the startup world for, I think, over 20 years, right? Now, in the process, we have both invested in startups and mentored a very large number of them. And we find that in general, the level of awareness of founders about how to make their startup successful, how to get funding and so on, is very, very low, right? Of course, you have these exceptions like Byju's or, the Bansals of Flipkart or Ritesh Agarwal of Oyo Rooms. But by and large, founders have very little clue about how to make the startup successful and how to get funding or whether to get funding or not. So what we decided in our infinite wisdom is that we would write a book which hopefully is able to help a large number of founders. Because so far, we were only, when we met a particular founder, we would give him advice or her advice. But I mean, we could only tackle maybe 5 founders in a week at the most, right? Here, potentially, we can reach out to probably thousands and thousands of founders. And by the way, the interesting thing is most founders have exactly the same problems. The issues are similar, problems are similar, opportunities are similar, right? So which is why we thought a book would be the right thing to do.
That's excellent, sir. Like, it's actually so well put, because I think you've covered two very important aspects. One being that, like you said, that, we don't, a lot of times founders don't know when, they actually need funding or don't need funding, and how they should be raising money, and, all investment related issues for the company. And the second thing being that, you can reach out to so many people through this book, which is amazing. And I think books really offer that, kind of mentorship to us. So it's wonderful. And this topic is so relevant for all founders.
So, sir, tell us a little bit about the process of writing this book, because you've covered quite a few companies and entrepreneurs in it. So, how was that process for you? Did you do extensive interviews with everyone, or how was your writing process around the same thing?
So, first of all, I must clarify, the book is called Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares, but it's not only about funding.
Right.
It's about creating successful startups, within which funding happens to be one step, but it's not necessary. So, what we decided to do was, if you look at books on the subject which are available today, most books talk about either international startups, right, which are not startups anymore. For example, Amazon or Airbnb or whatever, Facebook. Right. Or they talk about the huge Indian success stories, right? The Flipkarts, the Byju's, the Naukris of the world.
Right.
What we realized was that if a founder has to learn from somebody, ideally it should be from somebody that he can identify with, right? So, today, the founder probably cannot identify with Sachin and Binny Bansal of Flipkart, because Flipkart is probably a bigger company than Tata Steel, isn't it? It's not a startup anymore. So what we decided to do was we would focus on the smaller guys, right? The guys which are not really known.
Right.
Secondly, what we also decided was we'll focus on those guys which we know personally. So many of these companies are those which we have invested in. Some of those companies are those which we thought we might invest in, but ultimately did not. And therefore that becomes a failure, right? So that's the failure story. And some of them are companies that we have mentored. So each one of these, I think either me or Sushanto, we have been personally involved in, and therefore we know these very, very well, right? So actually it didn't need too many interviews, except maybe a few clarifications, right, with these guys. However, what we've also done, in answer to your question, is it is not only about the small guys, because we have also interviewed a lot of the big guys, the successful guys, right? So Deep Kalra of Make My Trip, the founder, right? Sanjeev Bhikchandani of Naukri, he's in fact written the foreword. Yashish Dahiya, who's the founder of Policy Bazaar, right? Dinesh Agarwal of India Mart, right? So we haven't written stories about these big startups because those stories are very commonly known, right? Everybody talks about. But we have taken their gyan. We've taken interviews, we've put that into the book. So in the book, effectively, what you get is you get stories about the successes and the failures within the smaller, earlier stage startups, and you get gyan from the real big guys. It's a combination, and that's how we've done it.
That's brilliant, sir. And I think it's so important because, when we read these books sometimes of successful startups, you don't, of course, you can relate to, the problems they faced and they then overcame them. But for you in real time, then when you know of a startup which is just, about to hit it off, it's so much more relevant because you're probably closer to them than you would be to an Amazon, right? So I think that's really relevant. Yeah.
So, sir, is there any one of the stories that particularly is close to your heart in this book? One that really, hit all the high points and the low points?
Okay. So, by the way, this is the book. I'm assuming you'll show it somewhere.
Yes,
let me show it anyway, right?
Yes.
Funding a startup. And I, incidentally, I must tell you, I like this part most. And Other Night. And incidentally, this is a lead into a series. So, just as you have XYZ for dummies, A series on something to do with startups and other nightmares, right? So the next one could be leadership in startups and other nightmares. Subsequently, we could have one on people issues in startups and other nightmares, and so on. So, okay, so I'll give you a story. In fact, I can give you many stories, but let me give you one story which really hit all of us, right? In the book, we have modified the story a bit because, it's not fair if you have a failure. It's not fair to take the name of the startup as well as the founder. So in some cases, we've camouflaged the name. So I'll give you a slightly modified version of the story. And I'll give you a little background before that. One thing that we've done is in this book, we have created a framework called Persistent, which is based on, lots of startups that we have studied. And we said, if you want to be successful, you have to try and follow this framework. And all those who have failed typically fail in one or more of these parameters of the framework. So Persistent is an acronym where each letter stands for something. Okay. And one of the things within this word persistent, one of the most important things, possibly the most important thing initially, is one of the T's. Persistent has two T's. So one of the T's, and that T stands for team. And the team starts with founders. Okay. Right. I'll give you a little story about the founders. There is a very interesting saying that we have in our startup world, where if you have a great business model, but an average team of founders, they will mess it up. They cannot be successful. But if you have an average business model, but a great team, they will figure out a way to make it succeed. Right? So one quick story. There was a group of very young, bright engineers, I think 3 of them. They came to us about 6-7 years back. And they had developed a product which was to do with a waterless urinal, correct? And today waterless urinals are fairly common, but at that time it was not. And suddenly, we guys as investors, we were sitting in one room, in a conference room. That was before COVID. Suddenly, we were so excited. Why? Because just 2 months before that, Prime Minister Modi, in his Independence Day speech, had announced Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Right. So he had spoken about building crores and crores of toilets. And the question all of us were asking was, okay, wonderful, you build toilets, it's a great initiative, but where is the water? Now, suddenly these guys had said, we have a solution where you don't need water. So, all of us thought, boss, we are going to strike
the jackpot.
We have to invest in this company. Okay. So we told these guys, look, we still need to study your business for about a month and a half, but it's a very good concept. We are very keen to invest in it. However, one question, how will you market this? Oh, we'll appoint distributors, which makes sense. Right? So, okay. So we called them back after, I think, a month or month and a half. And these guys, these young engineers, they were looking very excited. We said, boss, why are you so excited? Sir, now we are working on a female version of the same thing. We said, hang on. What happened to the male one? Sir, wo hai. It's there, sir. You were supposed to appoint distributors. Yes, sir. It'll just take us 3-4 months to finalize this female version. Then we will appoint a distributor. You know what we did? At a stroke, all of us became poorer because we decided not to invest. So, we told these guys, look, boss, you are very good designers, you're very good tech people, but you have no business sense. A thing like this, if you don't hit the market running right now, you lost the opportunity, right? Yeah. What you need to do is, if you can get a co-founder, okay, who has business sense and who can take this to market, then we are willing to consider investing in your company. Otherwise, not us, nobody is going to invest in it, right? So, I think that's one of the hardest hitting stories I had. Such a brilliant option, but these guys had just fallen in love with their own project, their own product. And it became an R&D project. That's not the purpose. It's a business. Right. So I think that's the most hard hitting story I've seen. There are many others, but I think this is the most hard hitting.
That's wonderful, actually, sir. And it's so relevant to, I think, with failure, what happens is that when you are intelligent, especially in your academics, somehow it becomes harder for people to accept failure because you're so used to being, I think, doing well and succeeding at stuff. So that's when, you love your concept so much, but you don't want to actually put in effort to execute it because then you fear failure. Because once you put it out in the market, you're going to know everything about it, right? Whether it's working, it's not working, and everything is going to be out in the open.
Plus, these guys assume marketing would be easy.
Right.
They didn't realize the business angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you do tend to fall in love, I think, with your product so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that. But please remember, you're running a business. You're not running an R&D project. That's the mistake these guys made.
Yeah. So, sir, before we go into a break, is there any underlying, or you've been investing for so many years now and been around so many founders, mentored a lot of them. Is there one underlying or two underlying characteristics which are common between successful founders, or, is there something that you guys look at in terms of personal characteristics of the founder?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, firstly, you're absolutely right. The one thing we look at most of all is the founder. And within the founder, I think the one trait which every investor agrees with is passion, right? Passion for what you're doing. If you're running a startup, if you're running a business, you're, creating your own company, it is not a 9 to 5 job. It's a round the clock job. You can be woken up by a customer at 11 in the night, and you cannot say, look, don't wake me up, because you have no choice. You have to talk to the customer. He's angry, right? And he can cause you to lose other customers as well. And you can do that only if you're really passionate about what you want to do, correct? So I don't know, maybe I'll give you one quick example. There is a very interesting startup we have called Willowtail, Villotale. They have created homestays in villages, right? If you look at Airbnb, you have homestays in wherever, close to cities, etc. This is actually in the heart of a village where, you may actually see chickens being fed. You may actually feed chickens. You may be watching harvesting in action. You may be watching, irrigation of the fields in action. Completely different experience, right? Which most people in the city are not used to. So, these guys were very clear. They wanted to do something for villagers because they wanted to actually ensure that, this whole business of migration which happens from villages to cities, which unfortunately has reversed during the COVID period because people came. They said, look, can we provide livelihood to people within their villages, right? And they did this. Unfortunately, during COVID times, people stopped traveling, right? But these guys were very clear, we have to do it, right? Once COVID started opening up and, work from home started happening, right?
Right.
People have realized that work from home does not have to be work from home. It can be work from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection, right?
Absolutely.
So these guys, what they've now done is they've said, okay, we will go back to our philosophy where we want villagers to, we want to stop the migration and build up a potential economy in the village itself. So what they've done is they've said, okay, work from home can now be work from our homestay, correct? So their tagline is, don't work from home, work from Willowtail home. And they've just launched their campaign.
Nice.
And what they've done is earlier they didn't have this. Now they have whatever best internet connection is available in each homestay. And suddenly the responses are booming, right?
Fantastic.
So, that's the one thing we look for, passion. Because you'll have ups and downs. COVID was a huge down for everybody. You'll have ups and downs, and that's life. If you don't have passion, you will not be able to survive through it, right? So passion is very, very important. The other very important thing we look for is awareness and knowledge about the business he's getting into. We don't want superficial guys, right? We want guys who really, or girls, we want people who really understand their business. And obviously, attention to detail becomes an important issue. I think these are the top 2-3. There are many others, but I would say the top 2-3.
Amazing, sir. And then if they have a sustainable business with it, that's just brilliant.
So the right founder will make it a sustainable business, is our belief.
Absolutely.
On that note, we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another very special week on the IVM Podcast Network. Before I get to that, let me quickly thank our sponsors on the network this week. Storytel, thewholetruthfoods.com, and we have a new sponsor in Syed. Thank you all so much for being part of the network. So, this is Valentine's week, and we have a bunch of stuff for you guys. So I'm going to give you a couple of episodes that you could definitely catch up with. Agla Station, Season 2, Episode 12, Be Our Valentine. Ritasha and Ayushi have a little bit of talk about love and all the rest of the stuff that goes wrong with that. On The Habit Coach, Episode 396, Ashton Doctor did an episode which went into the much-debated origins of Valentine's Day. Also, do check out Candid Kannan with Siddharth Kannan featuring Govinda and his wife Sunita Ahuja. He talks to them about amazing 33 years together. But you know what, folks? If you want to hear more about these Valentine's Day things, what I suggest is go to our webpage, ivmpodcast.com/blog. And on the blog, we're going to post a bunch of different playlists that we've created for all the various major services. So if you're feeling in the mood for love, do check that out. You'll definitely enjoy it. Just a quick note on a few other noteworthy episodes this week. Nankari Kunal Vijayakar was the guest. They spoke about street food with him. On Simplified, they talk about vaccinating 1 billion people, then the logistical and administrative task in front of us. And on the Wire Talk, Siddharth talks to Devdutt Mukhopadhyay about the human cost of internet shutdowns. And with that, let me get you back to your show.
Welcome back, guys. We still have with us Dhruv Nath, author of Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. Hey, Dhruv, that was a very informational first half, and I think a lot of our listeners who may want to start their businesses or looking to already started their businesses would benefit from it greatly. So thanks a lot for those tips. So the next book we're talking about is Why I Stopped Wearing My Socks by Alok Kejriwal. And tell us a little bit about this book, Dhruv. How come it's so special to you? And Mr. Kejriwal is a very prominent voice on LinkedIn. I think most people in the business community are aware of him and his companies. So tell us a little bit about this one.
I think, the couple of things which really struck me about this book. So first of all, Alok Kejriwal, I don't know him personally, but he's also a member of Lead Angels, where I'm involved. Okay, so we guys, the organization knows him, but I personally think the one thing which really strikes me about this book is the title, right? If I'm looking for a book on how to run my business, on how to create a startup, this is the last thing I'm going to ask for, isn't it?
Right.
If I were to, put in keywords in Amazon, will anybody in his right mind put in the word socks? I can't imagine that, right? So I was very surprised when the guy decided on this title. I think the interesting thing is that if you have such a unique and such an odd title, people tend to remember it.
Absolutely.
If you have a title which is, startups, do well in your startup, etc., 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 everybody forgets because all titles are the same. Socks, my God, what? Chalo dekhte hain. Let's see what the hell it contains, right? So I think he's done a very smart thing. So he will not be, a person who's looking for, let's say, business or funding may not find this book on Amazon, but I think there'll be a lot of word of mouth because of this, right? So that is one. Second, what I really liked was, here is a guy from a very conventional business family. And I think he was in the textile business. They used to manufacture socks. And not only did he make changes within that business, but he also branched out into a completely different business, which was online gaming. And he was actually quite successful in that. And I think the good thing about the book is it's very simple, very easy to read. And, each story, it has lots and lots of stories, right? Each story is not more than about, I think, 2 pages, maybe 3 pages, sometimes 1.5 pages. Each one has one simple thing that he did. And that simple thing hits you. Right? So, in fact, I was talking to one of the people I have been mentoring, one of the startup founders I've been mentoring. He's the guy who recommended this book to me. And he says, look, whenever I'm a little down, I pick up this book, I just read 1 or 2 chapters at random. I think that guy, Alok, has done a great job.
Totally agree. It's great to just read and sort of reflect on it for a bit, and you can pick up any chapter anytime.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the next book that we are discussing is Coffee Can Investing by Saurabh Mukherjee, another favorite that we've discussed on Paperback a couple of times. So tell us a little bit about why this book is special for you, sir.
So I think again the title is interesting, right? And he explains somewhere in the first or second chapter why he called it coffee can investing, which is essentially something like I think he took you back to the olden time in the US where you would put savings, little bits of money, change, etc., into a coffee can, close the lid, and it is there with you. Forget about it, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately, you can access it whenever you want. So that was interesting. But I think the two, three good things about A, the book, and B, about the author. See, Saurabh Mukherjee is a very well-known figure in the area of stock market investing, and he's very logical. Uh, and he has talked about investing uh, thesis for different kinds of people, right? So this one is really aimed at the guy who's has no clue about stock markets, who has no clue about, who's very scared about, the downturns in markets. So whenever there is a market crash, for example, the kind that we had during COVID, he's terrified and he pulls out all his money.
Yeah.
So essentially, what he's saying is, your investment is like a coffee can. You buy it and forget it, right? You
Yeah.
buy these shares and forget it. And therefore, I will only recommend that you buy stocks or buy shares which are not heftily impacted by any downturn or by that logic upturn in the market, right? So, for example, a company like, let's say, Nestle or Hindustan Lever, it doesn't matter how much COVID you have, right? It doesn't matter how much the financial crisis the world goes through in 2008. People who've been eating Maggie will continue to eat Maggie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Same thing. And similarly, if you look at Hindustan Lever, people who've been having a bath, just because there is COVID, they won't start stinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
So they will keep having a bath, and therefore Hindustan Lever is also in that category. So I think essentially in this book is he has simplified the concept of, for the guy who's very new to investing. Yes, admittedly, he mentions that you will not make if you are a master at following cycles in the market,
Right.
and therefore you can invest in the right stocks at the right time and exit at the right time, you'll make more money. But
Absolutely.
using this in the long run, you will make sufficient money as long as it is long run. I think that's what is good about the book.
Yeah, and it's so also in lines with The Intelligent Investor, if you've read it, and it's basically for anyone.
Benjamin Graham, yes.
Yeah. So when you're entering into the market, there has to be a long-term investment that you're looking at, or a blue chip company, because you can't monitor it every day. So,
but again, going back to my book.
Yeah.
The problem with guys like Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett, obviously they have the same philosophy, and their books are great. But the guy in India, the reason why he can identify with Saurabh Mukherjee's book is it talks about Reliance Industries, it talks about Hindustan Lever, it talks about Indian companies, Asian Paints, not about Toys R Us and Coca-Cola and so on. So I think that's what is good about it.
And the reason I really like your book, especially at this time, is because being an entrepreneur myself, I found like there's not a lot of literature around the entrepreneurs of India and the uniquely Indian problems. So thank you for the book, and I'm sure it provides some real life insight into how people can make their businesses better.
So, by the way, if you buy 1,000 copies, you'll learn more from every copy.
We'll use that as a marketing strategy. Because we are your distributors now. And so the final book we are going on to is Freedom at Midnight by Dominic, Lapierre and Larry Collins. So tell us a little bit about this book. This one's a little bit different than the ones we've spoken about.
Yes, actually it's not really fiction. It's historical. I mean, it's about events that actually happened. I think two things. Number one, we all know that we got independence in 1947, but how many of us actually know the details? And I think the one thing which you get from here is a lot of detail which we never knew. My parents have lived through it. I asked my mother; she lived through it. She didn't know most of this, right? So I think the details are fascinating. What you never knew, and therefore you hopefully know now. I think the other interesting thing, this unfortunate, very, very tragic incident of Mahatma Gandhi getting assassinated. I think what the book has tried to do is to give you both sides of the picture, right? Now, I'm not saying I support either side. I don't get into that controversy, but I'm saying you begin to understand what was going on in the minds of the people who organized this, right? You never knew that earlier. You still can't condone it. It's a ghastly thing that happened, but you begin to understand what was there in the mind. I think that was. In fact, I think the book gets you to think. That's important.
I think having different perspectives to historical events is so important, because usually it's one-sided what we are taught and what we learn. So it's always a refreshing change to see it from another perspective. Just
That's right.
To try and understand what maybe was going on. Right. So a fantastic book, fantastic. And so before we end, let me ask you for some tips now that the pandemic has hit, and there's a lot of people who are already in businesses, probably going through a downtime in their business. Is there any tips you can, or any words of inspiration for them that you can share?
Can I share with you one more story?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Actually, the interesting thing is, from an investor's point of view, COVID has been a bit of a boon. And I explain why. We are now able to look at the COVID period and see how the founder reacted. So there are two kinds of founders, right? One says, "Oh my God, COVID has hit me. What do I do? I am finished. Mar gaya." Or in Satyajit, in your language, "More gelo, ami ki korbo, sarvanash hoye gelo." So that's Bengali, right?
Yeah.
I learned Bengali before you were born, by the way. So anyway, so that is one kind of founder. But the other kind of founder says, "Boss, it has hit us, but I'm going to fight. I'm a fighter. I will look for opportunities in COVID." So I'll give you one story of this kind of founder. There is a very interesting company which has been started by my students. It is called GREST, GREST, right? They have been in the business of repairing mobile phones, right? So if you look at companies like Cashify, right, or there are other similar companies around which pick up used old phones from individuals. They will supply it to GREST. GREST will repair them and then give it back to them. So it's a B2B business, right? Cashify is their customer. Now, when COVID hit, if you look at the first 2-3 months, markets were shut, right? People basically stopped doing everything except really essential things. So people did not even look at things like repairing. Okay. So these guys' business actually dropped a little. You know what they did? They realized during COVID, the one thing that has happened is work from home and also learn from home. Right. So every household now, the child cannot go to school. Therefore, the child has to learn online. Therefore, the child has to have at least a smartphone, if not a laptop. Right. Yeah. But 90% families cannot afford original smartphones, right? So what these guys did was they said, we will grab phones from wherever we can, old phones, repair them. We will make them look like new. So basically pre-owned phones, right? Like cars 24. Okay, sell them under the brand name GREST. So it may be a Samsung phone, it may be an LG phone, it may be an Apple phone, but it is going under the cover of GREST, and we will give a guarantee. Suddenly, these guys, they boomed because the market was just waiting for this. They said, look, we can't afford a smartphone, but we want a good smartphone. Chalo ye le lete hain, right? And, even today, I've been talking to them, and they say, every time I talk to them, sir, can we call off after 5 minutes? Because we are desperate to meet our distributors because there is just too much demand. We can't meet it. You know? So I think what COVID has really taught, not just investors, I think it has taught founders the fact that you never know what's going to happen. You have to fight. You got to be a fighter. COVID throws up opportunities. Any crisis, yes, it's a crisis, you may have to pivot your business model, grab the opportunity. And by the way, I told you about the persistent framework in this book. Persistent is also an English word. Got to be persistent.
Right.
You have a crisis. I mean, everybody has a crisis. Everybody faces it. 90% guys will die. They'll fall by the wayside. You have to be among those 10% who actually grab the opportunity, pivot and recover, so that once COVID gets over or the crisis gets over, you're in great shape. So I think that's the biggest message from COVID, or for that matter, from any crisis.
Golden words which we will take with us. So.
And before we let you go, sir, where can people reach out to you on social media?
So my LinkedIn, hold on, I have to give you my LinkedIn.
So I think if you search your name, it comes up.
Yeah, it does come up. So that is one. Otherwise, they can send me an email, and my email. How do I can put it down in chat. Wait a minute.
Sure.
I can give you my LinkedIn profile here. Just a minute. Let me just pick it up. It's slightly long, so I don't remember it.
We'll add it into the description.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll do that.
And so also my email ID. So I think it's preferable to give my LinkedIn.
Nice. So I think with the show, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the show.
Namaskar, dear friends. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. Life, as you know, is a journey. And you and I, travelers, how can we celebrate this travel? I have a podcast for you, Begin the Journey. I share stories and moments from my life. Do tune in every Monday and Thursday to listen to my podcast on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from. Cheers.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.